I'd like to welcome everyone. Um, Before we begin, we'd like to recognize that our work and the work of our community partners is conducted on the inherent and treaty lands of diverse Indigenous cultures and nations, including 46 Indigenous treaty agreements in Ontario alone. We're thankful to be able to work, live, and play on the lands and waters of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty Territory, which consists of much of Southern Ontario, including Toronto. I'm Barry Hillier, and I'm pleased to share the spotlight today with Brian Hickling. One of the things that I'm going to mention is we will be taking questions. So there is a Q&A section in addition to the chat. If you have questions, please just enter those questions in the Q&A, and we will address those at the end of our presentation. But our session today is on the art and purpose of brand positioning. And according to the US Bank, 78% of small businesses fail because they lack a well-developed business and marketing strategy. Well, this is important because a strong brand is the North Star toward building strong business and marketing strategies and so much more. Branding was, and in our opinion, still is very much misunderstood by many people who have reduced the concept to an aesthetic component of visual identity. But realistically, it's much, much more than that. We're going to review what constitutes a brand DNA, outlining how to define your brand, narrate that brand, and increase affinity for your brand over time. But Brian and I are going to do more than talk because we've all been to so many of these presentations. There's a lot of conversation. We also have a guided tool set that is going to help you to work through with yourself and your brand stakeholders how to create and how to evolve your own corporate brand. So we're going to get started with some introductions. I'd like to introduce Brian Hickling. He's a creative brand strategist who I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with for many years, well over 15 years at this stage. Brian he's an incredible individual. I love working with him. He has an eclectic and diverse toolkit with a rare basket of skills and perspectives, which isn't a surprise because he has such a unique combination of experiences ranging from advertising, communications, UX, digital and brand strategy, business consulting, and he's currently working with strategic facilitation as head of ecosystem collaboration at Communitech. And he's helping to connect the most brilliant people there with each other to help solve problems that matter in a collaborative way. But over his 20 plus years, he's worked with some incredible and amazing brands such as RBC, Nike, IKEA, General Motors, NBA with the Toronto Raptors, I'm envious, United Way, Western Road, Sun Life Financial, Labatt, Molson's, ATB Financial, and I'm only naming a few. He's also the founder of his own startup called Catalyst 17, where he saw the gap in a marketplace for creative and strategic services that focused on social impact branding.
Great. And I'd like to introduce Barry. Again, I've had the pleasure of knowing Barry for 15 years. I'm glad we synced up on the amount of years. That was great. I have a lot of respect for Barry. He's a super smart, creative brand strategist and entrepreneur. And I think it's this combination of understanding what fuels a brand, how brands work, and also his hands-on experience as an entrepreneur and building businesses that make him a powerhouse in our industry. I love him for his clarity and his sense of purpose and succinctness. These are elements that brands really need. He did some groundbreaking digital work with his company called Dashboard, which he established in 1999, as well as establishing 2 SaaS-based companies throughout North America. So he's got some great experiences in being a founder. Barry knows branding inside and out, and he's actually been the steward of many brand strategies for Hellmann's, brands like Hellmann's, Vaseline, Axe Body Spray, Indirect, Juicy Fruit, Toyota, and Kraft, to name but a few. And while he was helping with these organizations and their brands, he also achieved some accolades in the industry, winning up to 50 global awards for creative and business results, and actually helped Hellmann's reposition their brand to being number one, So while actually having acknowledgments from your peers is important, also Barry has a great track record of helping businesses grow and get to number one. And so I really like working with Barry and learn a lot from working with him. He is now at the helm of an exciting new startup called Equo, which is a distributed marketplace built for small business and entrepreneurs. So let's get underway.
Thank you. What we're going to be talking about today is brand DNA. So the very concept of DNA started in biochemistry. What it means is self-replicating material that's present in all living organisms, and it acts as the main constituent of the genetic information for that organism. And the fundamental and distinctive characteristics, these are the things that generally they're unchangeable. And we like to think of this as being very much true for companies. And this is why brand DNA is so important. It's the self-replicating material that helps define who and what you are. And it's recognizable by everyone who sees you. And so you start by defining who you are, including understanding your purpose, and very critically, defining who your stakeholders are. And this includes not only customers, but employees, vendors, anybody who touches your brand. Then you create the materials and narrative behind your purpose, and collected together, all of these things functionally, rationally, and emotionally start to form that brand DNA. And by creating that and developing and promoting positive experiences over and over, you develop brand affinity, where your stakeholders become ambassadors who retell and even reshape your brand and allowing that brand to become stronger. So let's get started. And again, a few more people have joined on board. I want to let everybody know we are going to be taking questions at the end. There's a Q&A section. There's a little tab. Please enter your questions there. But let's start. What's a brand? A brand is a marketing or business concept that helps people identify a company, product, or even an individual. But brands have both tangible and intangible aspects, and both provide emotional and functional value. So in short, your brand is the way your customers perceive you. And this is important because great positioning or branding gives businesses control over the price and distribution of their product. And this is where we're going to start to actually deviate from perhaps some of the things that you've heard in the past. Because a coffee is made with the same beans, it's roasted, it's added to water. So why is there a difference between the price of a cup of Joe and Starbucks? And it's branding. So it's critical to be aware that that brand experience and having a plan to create a brand experience, it doesn't just happen, and it's more than just a lot of creative thinking. It needs to be well thought out. It's a strategic plan, and it has an impact on your business in real financial terms. So often, a lot of leaders don't really understand that. They don't understand the building blocks required to create a brand. They confuse branding with things like logos. This happens all the time. Slogos, other recognizable marks. But it's much, much more than that. In spite of all of this, when companies start their branding with a logo or other tangible elements, they're really missing the mark in the true power behind building a strong, powerful brand. And when you take a look and you think of a lot of the brands that are around you today, so many of them convey deep, connected meaning. If you ask anybody what Disney means to them, or Harley Davidson, or Yves Saint Laurent, you are going to have a reaction. You're going to have a mental image immediately that's much more than just the product itself. So my daughter and I love Batman. I'm going to use a geeky example here. And let's look at the power of the bat signal. You ask a 50-year-old what that picture of the bat on yellow means to them, and you ask a 24-year-old, there's a deep-rooted connection. And if you go and you find a 5-year-old and you show them a t-shirt with Batman image on the front and watch that smile light up on their face, that's not a logo. It's much more than that. It's a collection of those connected experiences that involve you, your friends, and your family. and they deepen with more interactions and positive experiences. That's truly what branding accomplishes. That's what it is. So even when you take a shitty experience, like George Clooney's movie Batman and Robin, remember that? Panned by fans, and George even makes fun of it himself. A good brand's able to weather those storms. So when the intangibles are present, it increases our capacity to stay connected and to have what Brian refers to as brand elasticity. That's where a great brand can be stretched, but still bounce back. And that's why when you put time and effort into building a brand, you're increasing the value in that connection with that audience in exponential ways. So why is it important to go beyond the logo and the graphic elements? And in fact, it's also going beyond marketing. So that notion here with this comic of marketing is I'm a good lover, or it's more than advertising where it's I'm a good lover, I'm a good lover, I'm a good lover, where repetition is used to build awareness. And it's more than public relations where somebody says, trust me, he or she's a good lover. When you think about your brand, you really want to think about the entire customer experience. Everything that does include your logo, it includes your website, your social media experiences, the way you answer your phone, the way your customers experience your staff. You want to create brand affinity and loyalty where people have an idea of what and who you are that's consistent. So in short, your brand is absolutely the way that your customer perceives you. Your employees perceive you. The general public perceives you. But this takes effort, focus, strategy, and tactics. So the question then becomes, why bother? What's the end benefit? Because this is where I really love this cartoon. What's the ROI of our marketing? Well, there's an increase in brand awareness and brand affinity and brand sentiment and brand engagement. Well, how about in terms I can understand, like EBITDA? Oh, it sounds like you just made that up. Branding is as much about money as it is about those creative elements. That's why your CEO, your CFO, founders, COOs need to understand why investing in your brand actually leads to tangible results. So we're going to jump back to the coffee here. A strong brand improves cash flow because customers choose more, stay longer, buy more, and they're willing to pay more. This ultimately increases the overall valuation in your company through increased market share, velocity of sales, loyalty, and profit gains. So because great positioning or branding gives businesses control over price and distribution, that leads to long-term, very consequential increases in value. So there was an analysis by the Marketing Accountability Standards Board, which showed that brands contribute on average 19.5%, and in some cases well over 50% of enterprise value when the impact of the brand is properly measured through cash flow, profits, and corporate value. Going to jump over to Brian now.
Okay. So why is a brand important? We're going to touch on a few things. Certainly a brand is important because it helps set you apart from the competition. And that's really important. There's a lot of commoditized products and experiences and services in the marketplace. So you have to be really, work hard at making sure that you stand out and can promote your brand in that crowd. And it's crucial. Your company, no longer just competes on a local level. It's now competing in a global economy as well. People will buy local. They'll buy from IKEA. They have a basket of different brands that they feel they want to connect to and align with. And so just being the closest one down the street, the closest brand, isn't good enough anymore. It really has to be, we're going to get to this in a minute, but what the why is, what the connective tissue is there. So the challenge is how to differentiate yourself from others. And it's not easy to do. It is an ongoing effort. The other thing that a brand does is it tells people about your purpose. And everyone on the call probably has heard this idea of purpose, having a meaning, meaning. Today, people want their purchases to reflect their values and principles, and probably more post-pandemic than ever. We're living in a sort of a value-based purchasing era, and so people will want to, purvey and put their money, if they have a choice, put their money into something that means something to them, means something to their neighbors, to their community. So this is we've all witnessed this happening in the last month, as brands have pulled out of Russia, basically to value align, to make sure that their customers understand where their values are. So not only do customers expect the clarity and intrinsic product value, that's a given. They have to, your product has to solve a solution for them. They also want to have a hint of altruistic and moral values with the brand and the purpose. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. The other thing that's important, and everyone's heard about the great resignation around employees. Employees now, post-COVID, need a sense of purpose and mission more than they did even when Simon Sinek 10 years ago wrote about purpose. And so I think it's more vital now than ever that you bake that into your design of your purpose. So a strong brand generates referrals. Next slide, generates referrals. And, I've been in the advertising business, as Barry has been, and you can pay for advertising, you can pay for communications. But the best form of communication out there is when I recommend something to Barry and say, Barry, you really have to go see this movie, see this new Batman movie, or whatever. So people wear brands. We use brands as connection to others in society as well. So people wear Nike or Adidas or drive certain cars, Tesla. They're trying to connect to certain meanings out there. And people enjoy talking about brands. Brands, when we refer something, if I refer something to Barry, I'm actually putting a little bit of my trust equity into that referral. So it's really important if we can try to get your brand to have that kind of sense of purpose. And here's a quote. This quote is really, really powerful to me. More than features, more than benefits, we are driven to become a member in good standing of the tribe. We want to be respected by those we aspire to connect with, and we want to know what we ought to do to be part of that circle. So again, I think this idea of value-based branding and purchasing is really vital going forward. Another area that we wanted to talk about was how brands can help you define your promise or your purpose to your stakeholders. A strong brand helps customers know what to expect. It's really a promise. You may love or not love Starbucks or McDonald's, but you love their consistency. I remember when McDonald's first started to come on highways in Canada as stops. I love that as a father. Maybe not the best food, but I knew the consistency was there. So if I had to pull in to McDonald's or to go to Starbucks, there was consistency. And that's really important. Consistency is key. Again, clarity, standing for something, and making sure you connect emotionally. And we'll talk about that as well. So the next thing we want to talk about is how brands can help you create clarity, and how we can actually sort of guide you a little bit today in our seminar around what clarity means and staying focused. A brand and purpose and clarity is just as important for the leadership, whether that's you or your team, as it is to the consumers and your employees. It's really easy to, shiny object syndrome and follow this and follow that. And maybe we have to adjust and do this, and maybe we have to adjust to do that. I think your brand, if it's founded in some very good sort of tenets, can really be a sort of a wayfinding tool and a way to say no to some things and yes to other things strategically. So it can be very useful strategically in your leadership role, running your brand and your company.
So over to Batman. So if we remember the bat signal, a good brand connects with people at an emotional level. They feel good when they buy the brand. So purchasing is an emotional experience. It's not just about functional need. So having that strong brand where people feel good at an emotional level when they engage the company, what that's really allowing is it's allowing for that brand affinity to start to take over and further build on value, where you have those tangible and those intangible experiences that are starting to build that affinity. And that business value, it's tangible and it's measurable. A strong brand will provide value to the organization beyond physical assets or IP. So if you think about the brands that you purchase from, Coca-Cola, IKEA, Apple, Ford, Lululemon, these are companies that are worth more than the equipment, the products, the warehouses, the factories. They're worth so much more than those physical assets because the real value, that delta, far exceeds the physical value. And this again is why founders, CEOs, CFOs, and COOs need to understand the financial implications of how branding can actually increase enterprise value. So wrapping it all together, the best branding is built on a strong idea with a purpose and a mission, a crisp and simple idea that you and your staff can not only hold on to and commit to, but that you can deliver upon consistently. And it needs to permeate the entire organization at all levels. This isn't just about your communication strategy. It's not a marketing tactic. It's your company's very DNA of who and what you are. And when the organization is clear on that corporate DNA, they can deliver on that promise to the brand. And the fruits of all that labor, building brand loyalty, increasing word of mouth, increasing sales, increasing your profit and your revenue, as well as being able to retain better staffing and have higher team satisfaction. So I'm going to go over to Brian to chat a little bit about this.
So the next area we're going to talk about is called narrating a brand. So once you've defined it, you have clarity around it, you've designed it, you need to tell stories around it. It's how your brand actually lives. And people like stories. They actually absorb information and retain information longer when they have a story. But I'm going to talk about a project here called the Significant Object Project, and this is one that I found was really interesting when I came about it a few years ago. And it was conducted in 1999 by two New York journalists named Rob Walker and Joshua Green. And they conducted an experiment because they wanted to prove or measure or understand the worth of storytelling. So what they did is they went out to flea markets around New York and they bought junk for 33 cents, for 50 cents, for $1. I think the highest item was $1.25 or something like that, or $1.30, $1.29. So they bought 100 pieces of this, what they called tat. And these were different types of objects that really had no real value. They're knickknacks, basically. And they then reached out to their writing community. Some were journalists, some were screenwriters, some wrote movies. And they asked them to take an object, pick an object, and write a story around this object. And it was sort of an anthropological experiment to actually demonstrate the effect of narrative around an object of inconsequential value. And they just really wanted to understand that their craft in writing stories, whether it's for journalism or for entertainment, had intrinsic value. So they basically did this. They basically took the 100 things. They only added up, I think all the items added up to $129. They each wrote a story, and they posted these stories, these fictional stories, onto eBay, and they sold them on eBay. And they added the story, and people could read the story on eBay, and they could bid on them. And the winning bidder was paid for the object and was mailed the object, and was also mailed a printout of the story with a little bit of a hand note from the writer saying thank you. And here's what the experiment unveiled. They sold $128.74 worth of knickknacks for $3,612.51, which was a 2,799% increase in their market value. The experiment was a success in that it proved that stories had impact directly on the perceived value of things, and that the price people are willing to pay is based on their understanding and their perception of value. Okay, so without a story, that rabbit is worth $3. But with a story, the rabbit is worth $112 because people, even though they knew it was a fictional story, they loved the combination of the story and the product. So we can see how any product, whether it's a amazing product or commoditized product, can be helped in its perceived value with storytelling. And I think this is a brilliant example, even though it's not really directly related to branding, really shows us that one of the components of branding is then actioning the brand around some stories. Barry.
So your brand is really a composite of everything that you do and you say across multiple experiences. It's the story that you create that affects all of your stakeholders. So when you create a strong brand with purpose, you're building blocks that can launch and sustain the company profitably. And again, going back to just that example that Brian mentioned, being able to create a story that connects with people does add value. And when you have a guiding light that ensures everything that you say and do that aligns your brand purpose with all of your brand strategies, all of your business strategies, all of your market strategies, what ends up happening is you're powering that ability to maximize your value and your impact with those stakeholders. So yes, your brand is your logo, it's your marketing, it's your advertising, it's your identity and design. But it's also the strategies, the experiences, the value, the stories, and the trust. That's what really creates that shared understanding. And it's what demonstrates what is that connective tissue with your brand and all of those stakeholders. So I'm going to pass this over to Brian again.
So the last thing in our DNA structure that we're presenting today is around affinity of the brand. So now we've talked about designing a brand, some of the components of a brand. We've talked about storytelling and bringing your brand to life, and actioning the brand through all the different ways that a brand needs to articulate itself. We're going to talk about affinity and trying to drive people to be attached to a brand. So here, there's some basic human desires that match each specific archetype, and these archetypes have been developed. It's ones that we found in our strategic journeys over the last few years, and I think there's different ones out there in the marketplace. They're all pretty much the same thing. But what's really great about these archetypes is they're going to help you define the brand, line up to one of these, and I think it can each brand can appeal to maybe 3 at the most, but we would encourage you to make sure you define the dominant archetype of the brand, what your brand stands for. The purpose should align actually with the character and things like that. We'll provide some clarity on that. But I think what's really great is a toolkit that we're providing today are these archetypes. I think they're very well done. Here is an archetype called the outlaw. They like revolution. They don't like rules. I lived in Alberta for a while, so there are lots of outlaw mentality out there, and I really like the Alberta cowboy mentality. Let's do it ourselves kind of thing. So certainly brands that have lined up towards this have been Diesel, Virgin, and of course Harley Davidson. I think everyone, even if you don't drive a Harley, understands that it's succinct. It means something. It means rebel and outlaw. The next one is called the explorer, and so again, these people like freedom. Very similar to the previous outlaw, but explorers maybe don't have as much sort of non-conformity. These people are conformists, but they also are explorers. They like to discover new things. They like new brands. These might be early adopters to your brand. But again, they like the outdoors. So Jeep, North Face, Patagonia definitely are brands that would line up to that.
So the magician They strive to make dreams come true through, their mystical ways. So what does that mean? Well, they're all about loving power. It's all about making things happen. It's mystical, it's informed, it's reassuring. They're taking their customers on a transformational journey as they connect with their audience. So these are brands like Coca-Cola, Disney, Dyson, or you can look at the hero. Now, the hero's main motivation is to prove their worth through courage and determination. It's all about mastery. Their brand voice is honest, it's candid, it's brave. We're talking about brands like Adidas, Nike, FedEx. The hero wants to be inspired by the possibility to achieve things, and it's the gratification that comes from being successful. The lover, well, they desire to be desired. This is about intimacy. We're looking at the experience of closeness, of a motivation to be more physically or emotionally appealing. So naturally, these are brands like Alfa Romeo, Chanel, Victoria's Secrets, or the jester, going a very different direction. It's all about having fun, living life in the moment. And all of these things, it's fun-loving, playful, optimistic. So what are those brands? M&M's, Old Spice, the Dollar Shave Club, as an example.
The next is every man. Every man wants to simply belong. He wants to be a good neighbor. He wants to be, he's never overly funny or overly rude or overly loud, but he's dependable, right? And he wants a sense of belonging to others around him. He's honest, he's humble, he's friendly. And if you think about the brands like IKEA, Target, even Costco, things like that, this is the everyman. We all belong there, and they're consistent, they're solid. And then we get to the caregiver, and the caregiver is really the selfless brand. It's the one that is driven to protect others, and especially those in need. So Dove is actually, if you think about Dove as well as UNICEF, as well as World Wildlife Fund and Tom's, who actually gives money and shoes to people who don't have them in third world countries. This is a really important one from a sort of social caring point of view. And the ruler, completely opposite of, of the last one. The ruler desires control and dominance. They're proud, they're authoritative, they want to be seen as being part of the in crowd. So this is why the brands like Rolex and Mercedes and Porsche and Louis Vuitton and things like that actually stand into this. They want to be seen as a VIP.
So when we get to the creator, they've got a desire to create something new, something exceptional, something that wasn't previously there. It's something that has enduring value. It's all about innovation. And the brand voice, it's inspirational, it's daring, it's provocative. So think Lego, think Apple, think Adobe. To appeal to a creator, you need to celebrate the creative process and inspire self-expression. Or we're going to take a look at the innocent. That's all about safety. It's the innocent is a positive personality and optimistic outlook on life. They crave safety, but ultimately they want themselves and everyone else to be happy. You're looking again here, Aveeno, Dove, Innocent, all of these types of brands. Or the sage. The sage, it's all about understanding. They're seekers of truth, knowledge, wisdom. And their drive comes from not just understanding the world, but sharing that understanding with others. So that's Google, that's BBC, that's the, Oxford. So over to Brian.
These are just tools to design your brand and to create a tone and a character and a framework. It can help you with your narratives, things like that. But what we're driving towards is building affinity for the brand, building that kind of connection, that connective tissue. So a brand can be defined by the connection between your brand and its stakeholders, and that includes customers, investors, employers, neighbors, your own family. Affinity is really what makes your customers want to talk about it and want to spend time with you. There's actually sort of three stages here of brand affinity. There's the sort of the start, which would be brand awareness. Certainly if you're a new brand in a marketplace, or you're a new startup, you need to create awareness, right? Definitely you have to be out there. So people have to know your brand. They may buy from you, they may try you. Early adopters would try you on brand awareness, but you're not sort of at the plateau, at the best place. Working your way to brand affinity is brand preference, where you start to say, hey, I like this brand. I've used it a little bit. I tried it once, but I actually like it. I like what they stand for. I read a great article about them the other day. So people like your brand. So that liking, it's kind of like building up that relationship over time. So they will start to choose you over others. Maybe not all the time, but a lot more than they did with just trial. And then the highest level, or the place we want to drive to, is brand affinity, where people love your brand. They go over and above and they tell others about it. And so this is where you've really, from a Maslow standpoint, it's sort of enlightenment, right? The brand has reached its brand affinity enlightenment. And you probably know some of the brands that you would actually say, these are my brands. I tell others about this brand and I really love this brand. One of the things I like when I go in an Apple store is when I deal with one of their customer service people, they love their brand that they work for, and that's infectious. When I go pay way too much for a piece of computer equipment from them, it's okay to me because not only am I getting dependability, I've been a longtime Apple advocate, so it's one of my brands that I have affinity for. But I'm evangelized every time I go into a store and I actually have a problem and they work it out. And yes, it costs me a lot, but I like that interaction and like that connection and the consistency around brand affinity. So that's one brand. So turn it over to Barry.
So one of the quotes that I really like, and this is an old quote, is for the person who doesn't know where they want to go, there's no favorable wind. And this is such a great quote because you can't really define your business strategy. You can't define your corporate goals if you really don't understand where it is that you want to go. So what we're talking about, and we keep emphasizing that this is something that's a much more integrated and deeply rooted concept than just pretty logos, pictures, colors, tone. And so as we go through this, I do want to acknowledge a quick question from Monica, who asked if the archetypes will be available earlier. We're going to be sharing this entire deck. So please reach out to us. Our emails are attached. Hello@Barry Hillier for me. And Brian, what's yours?
It's at brian@catalyst17.com. So we'll make this.
Yeah, I always just hit Brian. But we will make this available. But the critical thing to emphasize here is where to go. So it's great to sit down and say that. So we're going to start to shift from this conversation into what are tools that can actually help you define and redefine your brand. Because being able to sit down and just talk about branding, to talk about you need your North Star, that's one thing. Actually being able to organize and put that together is something else. So I'm going to pass this over to Brian now. And what we're going to do is walk you through a bit of an approach of a workshop that can help guide you into doing actionable next steps to make your brand DNA something that you can build yourself.
Great. So we've got a collection of tools that we've put together over our experience in navigating, building, and counseling brands on building their brand. And so this is sort of the go-tos, if that makes sense, for what we would like to take you through. So it's really important when we're starting to design a brand or a redesign. I mean, you may have a brand today, but you need to get to the next level. You have to iterate it. It has to kind of go forward. And so a brand stakeholder definition exercise is called for here. And what this means is on a piece of paper, stickies are really great for this. Get yourself Post-it notes and start putting all the different stakeholders you can think of, and there's actually more than you think of. And work hard at this. Try to put 20 different stakeholders on this board. It could be family members, it could be investors, it could be yourself. Actually, you actually are a stakeholder, and it's okay to put your own name up there as a stakeholder of your brand. And so this exercise really is just one of creating an inventory of stakeholders. So that's sort of a step one approach there. Next, what we want you to do is make some choices. And we need you to build, or would suggest that you build from the pool your picks of your top stakeholders, your top three. So if you've built an archive of 15 or 20, you're going to have some discussions with other people, argue with yourself if you need to, but you're going to actually have to make some strategic choices. You don't want to boil the ocean with a brand on how many stakeholders you're trying to support. It's costly, and it can also start to get very undefined the more stakeholders you try to appease and you try to line up to. So make a stakeholder map here and put their, who they are and a little bit about them and their life. Now, this is probably the most important part. Once you actually have isolated your stakeholders and identifying them, give them some shape, is to actually look at three different lenses here. And we call this the functional needs lens. So we want you to look at your stakeholders through their lens and ask yourself, what are the needs? Okay, so if this was Tesla, right, you need to get from point A to point B. That's all you really need for a functional focus here. You may have 2 or 3 around each stakeholder. They may be different, they may be the same. Maybe getting from point A to point B is the same, but then when you look at the lens for the different stakeholders, you say, but there's one other thing that's a little bit different that is a functional need, okay? I've got another analogy actually that a friend of mine used to use. Sometimes it's like a purse, either for men or women, it's a purse. And the function is to hold things, right? And so this is where you'd put the dry functional stuff. The next area is around emotional needs. And again, I want you to look inward towards the emotional needs of the stakeholders. What do they get out of it? So first of all, if you're a Tesla, for instance, a Tesla owner, you may want to have a need of accomplishment, a need that you've made it, that you deserve it. It's a nice automobile. You deserve that. Things like BMW and Mercedes, again, can feed that kind of I deserve it. A purse, for instance, if it's well made, maybe it's Louis Vuitton, maybe it is a purse that you really like, because not only does it keep things in it, but it actually makes you feel good because you've worked hard for that, and it's a bit of a treat to yourself around that. So put down a lot of the emotional needs you think those stakeholders have. What are the needs? What do they need to feel accomplished? They need to feel this way. Okay, so get the feels out, I guess, in this one. Next is a component I think we've seen accelerated in the last, 10 years, I think, around social needs. Now, people have always had social needs around brands. And what this is the broadcasting a brand has. So when I buy a bag and it has a logo on it, and I walk down the street with that logo on it, or my running shoes have a logo on it, that's actually broadcasting a social status out there. It's I'm aligned to green, which you could argue whether that's true or not true. That's up to you. But it is actually saying, not only have I made it, but I actually feel that I'm accomplishing something for the green agenda. So again, those are the type of things you want to put for your brand. Take your stakeholders and say, what are their social needs? How do they want to use your product to broadcast out? What is the stature? And sometimes the stature can be, it doesn't have to be always a luxury premium brand. It could just be, hey, I'm an everyday guy. Remember the everyman? Well, sometimes they don't want to have brands. They just want to have sort of a statement out there, like I'm driving a truck or I'm driving a Prius, and that's good. That's the statement I want to make. Cars are a great way to do this as well if you ever want to warm up to this exercise. Okay, the last area well, not the last area, but one area we want you to explore, and we talked about this before, was to define your purpose. This is actually one of the best tools I've found to work with as I do design work around purpose. And someone put this together, and what it is a bit of a purpose map, and it's got some very well-known brands that you would know well intrinsically, and it articulates the areas by which they own from a purpose point of view. And what this will do for you, and how it can help you, is once you kind of say, oh, here's my archetypes, here's my map around how the emotional, the functional, and the social needs. This might be a step that kind of helps you build your brand, and then it says we're going to stand for this purpose. We're going to stand for this thing. So the way it works is in the inner wheel, the outer wheel has. Hold on, I'm just blowing this up because it's too small on my screen here, so just bear with me. So for instance, IKEA there, it says creating relief and to reduce friction. Now it's arguable that, if you ever put anything together with an Allen key, you might argue that it doesn't have reduced friction. But if you can think about the flow when you go to an IKEA store, that is the frictionless experience. It's all linear. You kind of go through, you get your things, and you check out. It's very streamlined. So that's their desired impact in creating that purpose around that. So this is very much functional purpose. So again, we're going to show you in a minute how to write your purpose statement, but we exist to, and then you can finish the sentence, enable potential, creating impact by inspiring greater possibilities. Okay, so what we're driving you to is building a sentence out for yourself that actually becomes sort of this pinnacle or this focus point for your brand. And so you're going to write a purpose statement, and that purpose statement is going to consist of we exist to, and you're going to write a statement there, a couple of words, by, and this is how you're going to do it, for the good of, and this is the good of your customers, the good of the world, it's the good of something, right? It probably shouldn't be the good of your bank account. That's sort of that's an old world paradigm for brands. And then how this impacts the people we serve, and then a statement around how we make money in order to be sustainable. So again, this is really important. You may do some great things. Patagonia may say, hey, we're going to do things that are really don't harm the world, but they have to make money. So they're going to make great products and great style, and they're going to have good stores, and they're going to support good causes, things like that. So those are just the ways you're going to articulate your brand through this purpose mapping exercise, basically. Then another handy word worksheet here. You've written some sentences out, but you're not finished yet. We want you to do a word purpose exploration. And so what this means is you're going to write a whole bunch of words. They probably came from some of the statements that you wrote in the previous exercise. But you can add new ones in here and get some help. Get, your significant other or your partners in your business or someone that you really like a lot and think they have some business savvy or brand savvy. Bring them in and help you with word exploration. So the idea is 20 to 35 words that you think are important words around where you want to go from a direction point of view with your purpose. And then you're going to take your top words. And I suggest you only take sort of 3 to 5 top words over it. And again, this is about creating some content and then making strategic choices and whittling that down. This is really part of the process here. So again, you'll have your top choices to that map. And then the very last thing, and probably the most important component of this exercise, is your 3 to 7 word sentence. And this may take you an hour to do. It may take you 4 weeks to do and come back to. But it is really important if you can have a 3 to 7 word sentence. And one of the things, and the reason that 7 words totally, is apparently there's been some research that say we only really can retain concepts that have 7 words. When we go further and start stretching it and end up with a big sentence or a paragraph, we don't retain that as well as 3 to 7 words. This is why taglines and advertising work so well. This is why "just do it" is lasted the test of time for Nike. 2 words actually, which actually breaks my 3-word sentence. But again, this isn't really a tagline. This is really something that if you had an elevator speech and you had to tell someone, an investor or whatever, these are the 3 to 7 words you're going to use consistently to articulate that brand. The next thing we're going to go to is really an interesting exercise called our superpowers. And so what we want to do is kind of, again, with all that information you've gathered, more clarity is starting to emerge here. And this is sort of this is a Venn diagram of 3 circles and your superpowers in the middle. And this is about how you're trying to get to your own essence, the core of your business. What is your product or business centered around? What is it passionate about? What are you uniquely gifted at? So we make running shoes, but we actually make the lightest, lightweight, most orthopedic running shoes ever. We're really gifted at design. That's our gift. And then what does the world need the most? And so it's really around what do your customers need? What do they need the most? This is where you really have maybe do some research, or if you haven't done some already around your product, you just need to know what are you solving? What problem are you solving goes here. And so again, this adds the map, these add the tools, this helps you with some clarity around your brand. And I found these very, very useful. Now, the very last thing is really, and one of the hardest things to do is a strategy for your organization once you have a brand. And I think this is sort of, this should be long-term when you do this. And this can take some time for you to do. And it's a very simple 5-step system developed by a professor at the Rotman School of Business called Roger Martin. I'm a big Roger Martin fan, and it's called the Strategic Cascade. And very simply asks 5 questions of you. What is our winning aspiration? So what do you want to do with your organization? What is its aspiration? And it's not a sales figure. It's probably something more grand and more people call it BHAG, the audacious goal. I think you need to define the winning aspiration. And then you also have to define where you want to play, what space you want to be in within your marketplace. So again, this might be, hey, we make cars, but we want to be in the eco sector. That's the space we're going to play. That's what the space Tesla is going to play in. Are they luxury? Yes, but that's not the space they play in. They play in the ecology space. How will we win? Is there really tactics? Are the things that you're going to do to actually meet the previous 2 objectives? What capabilities must we have? So sometimes you have to say, hey, I need distribution. I need new products once a year. I need some great sales staff that really believe in the company. There's a lot of capabilities you need to have. And this way you can start, again, I would use this map and start adding stickies and do this collaboratively with other people. It's always good if you're a founder of a startup, it's always great to bounce things off of other people. And then what management systems do we need? So this is getting very granular. This is around, do we need to have Shopify? That's a management system with their inventory control and things like that. So those kind of, you may have them already. It's okay if you do, just make sure you log them underneath these headers. This is really all you need for a great strategic brand of any company in the world, in my opinion. And I think that's what's so brilliant about this framework. Anyone can do it. You can be a startup with no people. You can be a multi-million-dollar corporation. I've actually run this with established 50-year corporations, and they actually find great it's actually good for them to have clarity and reaffirm some things, and even brings up arguments about, should we really be, is that really our winning aspiration to do that? So those are some of the tools that I think are really helpful. And then really the last sheet is really where to put all that. So this is just really a worksheet for you to work out these ideas. Have more than less. So start out with a few competing ideas or things that you want to put on the map. Sometimes if you're an organization with 2 or 3 people, you may want to do this exercise independently and then bring that to a workshop so that you're not actually influencing each other with these concepts. And lastly, will be around the narrative is the story pillars. So again, it's important to have 3 to 4 story pillars to support. We see this in social media all the time. We can't boil the ocean with topics. So I think it's really important when you're having a social media engagement plan, they reflect your strategic pillars. So these are the 4. We're going to have ecology. We're going to have some luxury. We're going to have some social impact for Tesla. We're going to have something about Elon Musk going to space. I don't know. Maybe those are the 4. But what that, define your 3 to 4 pillars, and that's all you need. And just be consistent when you go to market with each of those stories or themes.
So once you've defined that brand DNA, creating the tactics and the strategies becomes easy. As Brian said, you now have a North Star to guide you, but you also have buy-in from the collective. And that's really, really important, because if your team doesn't believe in your brand, you're already dead in the water. So a strong brand can ensure integration, consistency, and experiences that impact, create affinity, and allow that real emotional connection between your customers, your employees, even your vendors, and allow you to build that awareness, loyalty, and profit over time. So if we now take a look at this sort of loyalty loop kind of notion, typically what often happens is people, when they think about branding, are looking for this plan, and they haven't done that work that Brian guided you through. And what that means is you have tactics that aren't necessarily focused. They're not laddering up to your broader business needs. They're not laddering up to all of the needs that you want to achieve in terms of your long-term goals. And when you can start to utilize that brand DNA and start to take those tactics, you can now define whether or not those tactics, A, make sense for you. Are they the right tactics to implement based on your stakeholders? Are the messages correct? Are they consistent? Are they integrated? What's their purpose for being there? And when you do all of those things, what ends up happening is you are setting yourself apart from the competitive set. You're creating much stronger brand loyalty that results in customer loyalty, employee loyalty, and ultimately greater profits. So what we want to do is get to some questions now. And I hope that the last 58 minutes has been useful. So I'm just going to go through. Paul Higgins has just asked a question. What are some different methods to tap into the values and emotional needs of your customer when building an emotional idea around your product benefits?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Do you want to get started there, Brian, and then I'll
Sure. Absolutely. Some of the methods into tapping into the values and emotional needs of your customer when building an emotional idea. Yeah, I think this is great. First of all, I think it's important to do some interviewing. Maybe first start with an archetype or a few of the archetypes. It's okay to start with a sort of a theory. So we think our archetypes are these 3 archetypes or these 2. Now go find some customers around those archetypes and see if you can ask to interview them and talk to them and find out really what their needs. Be an anthropologist, I guess, is the answer here. Be curious. There's also some great articles online around needs, and if you search for it, I mean, Google's a vast, pool of knowledge. There's a lot of great papers on emotional needs. The other thing, Paul, is use yourself. Use your own intuition. Use your own humanness in starting to design some of those values. Sometimes we always want to kind of take ourselves out of it and say, okay, this is about someone else and another customer. But it's also around how you or the people in your life. So use them if you not abuse them, but just use them and see if they could they could talk to you. I used to use my daughters actually for some of the exercises I were doing that were youth oriented. I would just sit down with them and ask them a few questions, and they were happy to help out. So hopefully that added some ideas to that question.
Well, and I'm going to build on that and add to it. There's a reason why you, as founders, started your company. There's a reason why your employees, hopefully, are working for you and not somebody else. Ideally, they're not just there because they're getting paid. They want to have some sort of connection. So the starting point is, what makes you so focused on whether it's coffee or tea or fashion or yoga or cooking. You already have an emotional connection. There are values that you are permeating into that company that you wanted to start. Then sit down and ask your employees and talk to your customers. Too often what happens, especially with marketers, ad people, they spend their time assessing the brand from inside four walls, and they just don't get their asses out there. And to Brian's point, talk to the people using the brand. What is it that makes them connect? What makes them love it? What makes them hate it? The dislike is equally as important, because now you can take all of that information, and that is now what you can start to use to build around that idea. Because even when you talk about the things people don't like, well, now that becomes a feedback mechanism where people appreciate the fact that you're a brand that listens, that you're constantly cycling and improving. Toyota is a great example of that. Their entire philosophy is continuous improvement. And so hopefully those are some areas that might be able to help there.
One last thing I'm going to add. One of the things I use periodically is Google Trends. Does anyone use Google Trends? Google Trends has a lot of interesting data on what people are searching for, and then actually can tell you a little bit around where things might be going from a value standpoint, especially if you use a values and lens on some of that data.
Now, oh, you're very welcome, Paul. So Tanya has asked, basically just so they can have this info for follow-up.
Yep.
Absolutely. Please reach out to Brian, or I will share this. I am going to be posting. Brian will be posting the video. But are there any other questions just while we're here? We kind of allocated a little bit of extra time. We realize some people may need to be dropping off now, but we're happy to.
We're available till
yeah.
till the end.
Somebody must have a question, or generally too, how did everybody feel about the session? Throw this up in chats.
Yeah, I would love to know. We need UX and feedback as well from
Exactly. Like if you found this valuable, fantastic. One of the things that we would like to also point out is while we're waiting for some potential questions, is we're going to be taking a look at adding some potential additional. I'll throw in the first one, and then I'll let you maybe introduce the second.
Sure. Yeah,
sure. We're looking at brand and the brand experience. So we want to start to explore what makes a great customer brand experience. And that means all aspects of the customer experience, the employee experience, really taking a look at how engagement is working. So we have that. Brian, you want to add anything?
No, we just call it BX. There's UX and there's CX, which is customer experience. But I think there's that idea of brand experience and designing that. So I think watch out for that coming ahead, and hopefully we'll get some of you out to that session. We're also going to do a session on social impact branding. So this is about how your brand can be articulated through a social lens. So you can actually do a lot of good with values alignment, with doing some things that are great for the community, great for the environment, things like that. So this is more than just CSR stunts. This is really baking social impact into your brand and what that looks like. And we'll be kind of highlighting a few of through the well-known brands like Patagonia and other lesser known brands about how they do it. And it'll be obviously some good learnings, and we'll be able to kind of show you some of the helpful tips and tricks around connecting your brand to social causes.
So Brent Suber just asked actually a really, really good question. Comments on how do you recover when there's public damage to the brand? So
Ah,
the issue with Disney in Florida, I can even go back. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember the brand name, but there was a big issue with the
I
product
don't know.
paint for the Brian, if you remember this, of the aspirin or one of the pills.
I don't know. It was fun.
Tylenol, that was a big one. Um, I'll start maybe this, and then I'll throw it over to Brian. But I think the first thing that you need to do is recognize the real apparent ability for the general public and your employees, importantly, to understand bullshit. So you need to be clear, honest, and direct. The fastest way to recover, I think, as a business is often very similar to the fastest way to recover personally. Own it, be honest, be transparent. It's really hard for somebody to keep beating up on you if you just say, you know what, you're right, I made a mistake, and you got to do it quickly. You wait too long, now you're engaging in public relations. You do it early, you can recover faster. And the key though is it's not just an apology or an immediate commentary. What's the actionable items that you're putting into place that are demonstrating that you've taken that information in and you've used that information to make sure that this doesn't happen again or that you're improving things? Brian?
I actually think when this happens to a brand, it's actually a gift if you handle it properly. I think people, if there's brand elasticity and people are with you and they're surprised by how you acted as a brand, owning it, as Barry said, and also rally around the problem. We call it sometimes fall in love with the problem. And I know that's hard to do when you think it's a disaster, but if you look at it from that standpoint, and Maple Leaf Foods a few years ago had some issues with its brand, and they just owned it and they recovered and they created a strong brand, and they did some things better. And I think that kind of idea that brands don't have to be perfect, I think people will come with you on that imperfect journey as a brand if you're honest with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And also a good reason to start to put money in the bank so that when you hit a speed bump, and every brand will hit some sort of public problem, there's elasticity there. It's not going to be a fatal thing. It's look at Will Smith. Okay, is that going to be fatal to Will Smith? No, but is it something he's got to own immediately and actually do something around it? Absolutely. And the same with the comedian as well. I think they have to both own it, right, at this point.
No, absolutely. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? We'd love to take any questions. We're also, if you have something that you'd like to follow up with,
Yeah, follow up with us,
please.
and happy to help people with their brands. It's really important. It's part of the economy of this country, whether it's small brands, medium-sized brands, or large brands. It's what makes Canada great. It feeds people, it employs people, and it's really important. So that's why Barry and I feel it's important to help out on this.
No, exactly. And even in some of the commentary between chat and just some of the thank yous. So first, thank you for the feedback.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. We appreciate that. But it's often where I find a lot of the brands actually start to formulate, it's sometimes in the startup stage, but more often than not, it's actually in the scaling and building stage.
Yep.
Because what ends up happening is, a lot of founders, a lot of companies get out there because there's a passion, because they love it. They just get started. And then all of a sudden what happens is they get bigger and they're like, oh, they're now competing so strongly and so quickly with larger competitors that they've now got to revise their brand, think about their brand for the very first time in a real, more concrete way. So regardless of what time that you're in, it's very much like planting a tree. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So it doesn't matter where your brand is today. As concrete as you want to make that brand DNA, you can always do work. You can always renovate. And as long as you've got a good solid foundation, don't be afraid, regardless of what stage your business is in, to go through that workshop, go through the slides, have those discussions that Brian mentioned.
Yeah, all brands go through that windy road on their journey. It's never perfectly straight, for sure.
Now, Monica just asked, do you feel social companies should use a different lens? And this is going to be an interesting conversation, I
Hmm.
think, because Brian and I talk about this all the time. So I'll jump here because I know
Yeah, go
Brian
ahead.
is very focused on social and purpose. It's one of the things I love about him. Um, we're going to be generally on the same page, but there's going to be some areas where we may have some different perspectives on this. I personally don't believe that social companies necessarily need to have a different lens. What I think social companies need to do is, and what I've just found in some of my experience, a lot of the not-for-profits, charities, people that very much have a social foundation, tend to neglect that business side. So to me, I actually feel like the lens should be the same as branding, but I think they should actually start to look and expand that approach to take on more of a social enterprise, approach. They're focused. They've got the emotional side down really well, but now what's that functional and what's that business lens that they can take into that? Where the flip side is a lot of the for-profits starting to actually go the opposite end. So I think it's less of a different lens, and it's just sitting down and just trying to create a focus that narrows down slightly differently, depending on if you're a social charity, social enterprise kind of approach versus more of your traditional for-profit. Brian?
Yeah, 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 I'm just going to add to that. Great. We are aligned, Barry. I think it's really important for social organizations to actually think of themselves as a business providing value and providing, some sort of commercial value. And one of the things I think it's interesting, and I've always said that to my for-profit clients when I've been doing strategy, is why don't you bring in, instead of just giving your social non-for-profit money, bring them in and have them teach you about keeping staff that actually are working for pittance. I've always been amazed at how many people, maybe they can't do it for long, but how many people will join non-for-profits for really noble reasons and because they want to care about the world. And I think they can learn from each other, is what I'm saying. I think the collaboration between non-for-profits and for-profit companies could be much more meaningful instead of just sort of commercial, or we're going to give you some money to enable your organization. There's a lot of learnings and cross learnings that they can share.
Now, Sri Harsha just asked an interesting question that's come up quite a bit
Okay.
in past experiences of how do B2B brands tend to differ from B2C companies.
Hmm.
Um, Brian, you want to kick that off, and then I'll throw in some thoughts.
Yeah, I'll let Barry answer, but here's my quick thing. I've never seen a difference. And it's really just because I've come from this thing that you're going to need to motivate humans to do something and provide value. So once you have humans in the mix and value in the mix, yes, there's channel, there's distribution, there's a lot of mechanical things that may be different, but the brand, some of the brand tendons and things that you need to do are very similar. Barry, you've dealt with a lot of B2B.
Yeah, I completely agree, and in fact, I often get a little bit irritated at this distinction of B2B versus B2C because people deal with people.
Mhm.
People still have emotional connections, functional questions, and one of the things, one of my SaaS companies was a content management system, and we designed our back end to look as good as the front end. And the reason that we did that was it's people using them. So why does the UI and UX suddenly change because somebody is operating the system versus a consumer
Yeah,
looking at your website?
still a human, right?
It's all the same things, and so I think that the foundation is the same. Now, where B2B and B2C changes is, I think, in your marketing efforts and your sales tactics. That's where you start to see a difference in terms of how you're approaching it. But your brand and the brand composition, there really shouldn't be a fundamental difference. But when you now go through the stakeholder exercise that Brian took you through, that's now where you can start to outline tactically how does B2B differ from B2C, and that's where I think you'll see some of the changes.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things is, oh, sorry, Daniel just said, understand your customer buying process, who's involved, makes the ultimate decision, what's the archetype.
Right, exactly right.
Agreed.
Absolutely agreed.
Now, Tariq had also asked here, as you grow into a new market or city or start to get your brand out there as an owner, plan to create a series of meet an owner to tell our story. Mm-hmm. What structure do you recommend to slowly release these video stories over, say, a month? Or do you get back to multiple touch points, but it's not tacky? You really like the idea of involving a writer in the process, as with the eBay story. Mm-hmm. This would be great for staff training. To me, I'm a big believer, and then I'll throw this back again over to you, Brian. I'm a big believer that you can do multiple things at the same time, and 1 + 1 should always equal 20. And so I think if you were to break down a simple way, maybe to kind of take a worksheet approach is short term, what are you hoping for? Mm-hmm. But then look at midterm and long term at how can you reuse that content. So if you're creating stories, what's that immediate impact? How are you going to get that out there? How's it going to be fresh? But that story later can become organic SEO. That story could be something that you pull back into your social media strategies, et cetera, et cetera. That also could be creating a story where you now go back and you say, we've just visited this neighbor and we told the story. We're now going to revisit where are they a year later. So I think if you segment it into your immediate term, intermediate, and long term, you can start to see how you can, with less effort, because I really think the more that you can focus on less effort, bigger bang at the end, very important. And that's not even just for startups. That's just good business. That could be a way to approach it. Anything to add, Brian?
No, other than turn your selling into storytelling, and they'll sell themselves. Like, create a story or create a way to talk about it. So add that creative writing to it. I think I've done some very dry pitch presentations that I kick myself for giving because I know better. And I just didn't take the time to add a story to it, to add anecdotes, to actually put your personal, some stories about your life and have that relate to the product that you're trying to sell. People love the connection between you as a human and the product you're selling. So try to put as much as you can about you, or allow your people to put their own selves into their own sales.
Now, Tanik has just asked a question. When would you recommend a startup focus on clarifying the brand, really defining it? Is this something we should start as early as possible? And is there kind of milestone that you want to reach first?
Barry, I'll let you've built companies from scratch, so
as soon as possible. When I started Dashboard, I went through the process of formulating what I wanted out of the company, but the name and the concept and everything that came out of it came about because I wanted a dashboard from the standpoint of all of the mechanisms that help you guide the company, guide the brand. But I also wanted that notion of being in a car where not only did you have the dashboard providing that guidance, but there was enough room in that vehicle to make sure that your team could step into that vehicle as you guided that brand down that pathway. And you basically went on a road trip together to discover and uncover essentially what ended up being.
You had a story baked into the name, right? You almost had a bit of a story right from the genesis of the company,
right from the get-go. And Equal was the same way. Like one of the problems that I have within the current ecosystem for small business and founders in general is the ecosystem's focused on that notion of the hockey stick curve, the exponential trend. And that fundamentally, that status quo approach of focusing on these unicorns isn't working. And so I wanted to break status quo, pursue realistic business models. Mm-hmm. So not this exponential hockey stick. And by breaking status quo and creating equo, that notion of the EQ was about also understanding that consumer, that founder journey.
Yeah.
So equo also, the name and our look, our approach, everything within it was based foundationally on a concept of what was our brand DNA. But if you don't do that right away, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's totally okay.
My guess is I've actually done this consulting for a few organizations that again have been in the business for 100 years, and they lost the plot of their own business.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to refine. Maybe you're 5 years in, you're getting a little fuzzy with how you're selling. It's not quite succinct anymore. Just pull over, take a few days offline, and just look at your brand and say, okay, how do we rein it back in? Why do we start this? What is the essence of it? And if it's not in there and it's already baked in it, get a creative writer, have them add some ideas in there, and get onto an idea and a concept. People remember, the hockey stick or the dashboard driving down the highway story more than they actually remember your name, dashboard, right? They remember the idea of what it feels like as a human. So it's never too late, and it's an ongoing process. You're always kind of defining. It gets fuzzy. You just take some time out, maybe once a year, and you just say, hey, let's take a look at our brand, our stories, and see if we can do a better job of it.
And I think highlighting your point, it's ongoing. It's going to change because look, your product's going to change over time. Society changes over time. How people in society perceive actions change over time.
Yeah.
So if you're not evolving your brand and staying consistent, you're going to run into problems. I mean, if you've ever looked at old ads from the 1950s or 60s or 70s, Google that right now and take a look at how well they would stand up today, right? It's so a brand is like a human. It should be evolving over time. You should be maturing over time. You should be creating different relationships over time. And if you do that successfully, those are the brands that tend to have much longer, healthier, more profitable life cycles. And the ones that don't focus on that and don't stay on top of things or are just focused on profit alone, they're the ones that they're going to be taking some hits.
Like Kodak.
Great example. Blockbuster
Could have bought Netflix, right, for I think $100 million or something.
I think it was less. I think it was like 23 million.
Some ridiculous. Like you and I could have whipped it up probably.
Yeah, it's completely crazy.
Well, not really, but yeah, crazy amount of money. But yeah, a brand is a living, breathing thing, and it changes over time. And I think what you said is the times change, so the brand has to articulate its purpose within the context of that time, right?
Yeah, and I think we all have personal journeys. Everybody that's still here is looking at two older white guys.
Yeah.
And we need to go on our own journeys to understand the world today, our role in the world today, and we need to mature in that. And likewise, so do brands. You have to be constantly self-evaluating, and in self-evaluating, what is your impact on the world?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a positive influence? Are you a negative influence? Can you be a better influence?
Mm-hmm.
Can you create new connections, better connections? And the more that we do that individually and collectively and from a brand corporate perspective, what's happening is you're evolving with the times in the same way that the world is around you. And I think like individuals that can't learn how to adapt, don't self-reflect, I think we all see what happens.
What are people's favorite brands out there? We're on chat now, and people can kind of post this into chat. Why don't we pop in? If I could task everyone online that still, throw some brands up here. I love actually talking about brands and why you like them. True Local, I actually haven't heard of that one. What's the jam there? Floret Forest, cool. Bench hoodies. They've been around for a while now. Your
All
favorite
right.
ones that you have.
Yeah. Natural product with integrity and processing transparency.
Yep. Yep.
Patagonia, ecologist. It's one of the exercises too, actually, is that can help as you're building your brand. Put up all the brands, go through this exercise, put up all the brands that you respect and that you follow and why.
Yeah. Figure out why.
You know, if you're building a company, I'm fairly confident if you're excited about other brands and companies, there's going to be some commonality as to that brand DNA. And that could be a good starting point.
Yeah, trying to figure out their brand DNA is a great exercise, Barry. That's a good.
Yeah. Yeah, and often, you know, both Brian and I come from agency backgrounds as a start. Sometimes a great trigger is to sit down and ask different questions. So instead of saying, what kind of brand are we? If you were a car, what kind of car would you be? If you were a fashion label, what would that be? If you were a restaurant, what restaurant would you be? Just being able to ask those different questions, that shifts. But I see a bunch of...
I've got a bunch of things coming through. Yes, thank you, Shira. Pick brands apart. Be a student of brands. I've been that for many years now, and still continue to dissect them and to dissect their DNA, right? Which is actually a great exercise for sure.
All right. Well, we're kind of coming down to the end now. I really appreciate your time, Brian, today.
Great. I appreciate yours as well, Barry. It's great to do this.
And would really, I think on behalf of both of us, thank you for everybody that's attended. I hope this was useful. And stay tuned for some upcoming ones. We really want to create more engaging seminar style webinars. And again, please reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a fantastic rest of the week.